Hello everyone, my name is Jack Fisher and welcome to my world. And today I'm going to share another unpopular opinion. Once again, it has to do with a superhero movie, and once again, I expect to get some angry disagreements in the comments. But I'll risk it for the sake of sparking a larger discussion about the superhero genre. You see, there are some movies that are so well made and so endearing that we gladly overlook their flaws. The superhero genre has plenty of examples. The Dark Knight, Avengers Infinity War, and Spider-Man 2 are among the best of the best. They're not flawless, but they're pretty damn close. So close, in fact, that their flaws are hardly worth mentioning. But one movie, in my opinion, gets way more praise than it deserves. I also believe it has certain flaws that too many people have readily overlooked. And that movie is Captain America: Civil War. Now, I want to go on record as saying I like this movie. I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. I just like it. For me, it's one of those movies that you can see once and never feel inclined to see again. Again, that's just me. I know that many people hold this movie in high regard, both in the pantheon of the MCU and among superhero movies as a whole. I can even understand why. This movie is exceptionally well done. It has a big, star-studded cast and has many great, memorable moments. However, it also has some major flaws that I don't think get enough scrutiny. And to explain my feelings towards this movie, I want to break them down a bit. And even if you don't agree with me, I hope by the end of this video you'll see where I'm coming from. To understand the flaws in Captain America: Civil War, it's also necessary to understand the comic that inspired it. Now, I know not everyone is familiar with Captain America's lengthy comic history, but you don't have to know all 70 plus years of it to appreciate how Civil War, the comic, not the movie, came to be such an important story for Marvel. In the context of Marvel's ever-evolving lore, it was a huge game changer. Civil War was an event that defined both a decade and an era of comics. Its effects were profound. It influenced subsequent books for years to come. This major crossover event didn't just upend the Avengers. It posed profound questions on the very merits of being a superhero. It's easy to see why Marvel Studios used this story as a basis for a movie. But there was also a relevant context to that story as it unfolded in the comics. And this is where things get a little political. But only a little, I promise. Civil War, the comic, came out in the mid-2000s. These were the dark days of the Bush years. The war in Iraq was going badly, trust in government was at an all-time low, even by today's standards, and discussions about accountability and oversight made for some incredibly heated rhetoric. It's probably a good thing that social media was still relatively nascent at the time, because those discussions could have gotten very nasty. This story tapped into that conflict masterfully. After an incident that left hundreds of civilians dead, including children, a real debate emerged about superheroes. How accountable should they be for the collateral damage they cause? And what role should the government play in that effort? How much or how little should superheroes cooperate with civilian authorities? On one side you have Iron Man. He's all about logistics and solutions. He believes that heroes should be held accountable. Moreover, he believes they should cooperate with the authorities within a legal framework. On the other, you have Captain America, and he's the personification of heroic ideals. He believes in accountability too, but not to the point of inviting politicians into the fight. He sees that kind of cooperation as prone to corruption, and that corruption will ultimately do more harm than good. Writer Mark Millar presented Iron Man and Captain America as two heroes hopelessly divided by principle. Others joined their cause. Some joined Iron Man, some joined Cap. It leads to tension, drama, and conflict that just kept building. Even the fans were divided. I still remember the heated debates on the message boards. Naturally, some were less civil than others. And the movie captures this division fairly well. The rhetoric is similar. The movie even sets the stage with an incident similar to the one that unfolded in the comics. However, it's that same setting where some of the problems within the movie begin. In the movie, the Sokovia Accords were a direct response to the Avengers' activities to that point in the MCU. Yes, they saved the day, but not without lots of collateral damage. The big question was, who should be held accountable for that damage? And that's not an unreasonable question. It's just an incomplete question in the context of the source material. In the Civil War comic, it's not just about accountability. It's about heroes working with government authorities within a legal, functional framework. They called it the Superhero Registration Act, which admittedly is a lot less vague than the Sokovia Accords. They're also a lot more specific than anything the movie explored. It's not just about micromanaging where, when, and how a superhero can operate. It's about bridging the divide between the authorities and the superhero community. That way, they can both be more effective. It's framed as something with genuine merit. Many heroes even see that merit. But Captain America, ever the idealist, only sees the unintended consequences. He acknowledges the flaws in the current way of doing things, but he has clear lines that he won't cross. To him, being a hero isn't about politics. There is right and there is wrong. That's it. End of debate. Anything or anyone that gets in the way of that just can't work out in the long run. To him, the Superhero Registration Act has good intentions, but way too many negative consequences. It's just a line he cannot and will not cross. Now, the Sokovia Accords are similar to the Superhero Registration Act, but barely. The specifics, which you can actually read in full on the MCU's wiki, effectively turn superheroes into agents of the government. Not collaborators, not partners, agents. It's even less heroic than it sounds. It even has some serious legal flaws behind it, which the YouTube channel Legal Eagle broke down masterfully. If you want a greater explanation of that, I've placed a link in the description. But it's not the merit of the Accords that's the issue here. The problem is the Accords aren't framed as an appropriate recourse to superhero accountability. The movie essentially crafts it to be antithetical to Captain America's principles. Now, the division is still there, but it's clearly slanted towards Cap. Now, thematically, that makes sense. This movie is presented as a Captain America movie after all. But by doing so, a core aspect of the Civil War narrative has to be skewed. And that's an issue if you want to make Iron Man's side seem reasonable. The movie does make that effort, but only to a point. And it ends up going to waste when you add other flaws into the mix. The friendship between Captain America and Bucky Barnes is one of the most important friendships in the MCU. The first Captain America movie established it. Captain America the Winter Soldier built on it. Theirs is a friendship of loyalty and trust, the likes of which anyone can respect, superhero or otherwise. It also completely derails the conflict in Captain America Civil War. Now, that's not a knock on Cap or Bucky. They're still great characters, but their friendship undercuts the entire debate surrounding the Sokovia Accords. It completely changes Captain America's focus. He's no longer trying to win a debate, he's trying to save his friend. Now, that worked out well in Winter Soldier, but it just doesn't fit the plot or theme of Civil War. It takes a story about a legitimate, impassioned debate and reduces it to a rescue story. Yes, Cap and Tony have heated debates in the movie, but those debates stop mattering once Bucky enters the picture. And it's here where Captain America's motivations become a little suspect. There's no denying that Bucky was mind-controlled in Winter Soldier. There's also no denying that he killed Tony's parents while he was being mind-controlled. But how do you hold him accountable for that? That's a relevant question, but one Cap never even tries to answer. He never explains why Bucky shouldn't be completely absolved. Instead, he just finds Bucky and helps him escape. But take a step back and look at the bigger picture here. Captain America helps someone who definitely killed two people escape accountability for their actions. Even though Bucky is his closest friend, it still sends this strange mixed message. So, it's okay for heroes to help someone escape accountability, especially if they're a close friend? And crimes committed while under mind control don't count as crimes, even when innocent people die? Again, these questions go unanswered. There's an effort to discuss them with the Sokovia Accords, but the characters abandon that discussion the second things get personal. Now, it's easy to root for Cap when he's trying to save his friend, but when doing so requires some less than heroic tactics, how does that vindicate him? By saving his friend, Cap ensures the Avengers remain divided. It's tragic, yes, but it's also a legitimate plot hole. And Bucky isn't the only one who complicates the larger discussions throughout the movie. Marvel has a long list of iconic villains, and when it comes to making those villains work, Marvel Studios has a winning record. While most fans have already forgotten Malekith in Thor: The Dark World, nobody will ever forget Thanos in Infinity War. Because as great as their heroes are, it's the villains who help foster that greatness. Helmut Zemo brought many things to Captain America: Civil War, but greatness wasn't one of them. The issue isn't that this version of Zemo is so drastically different from his comic book counterpart. I understand that not every villain translates well from comics to movies. In fact, Zemo may very well be the least accurate translation to date for a Marvel villain. But accurate or not, Zemo is still the villain of the movie, to an extent. But the problem with his role in the story is that it's very similar to Bucky's in that he also derails the debate that's supposed to fuel this hero-on-hero conflict. And his reasons for doing so are questionable at best. In the beginning, Zemo is almost sympathetic, almost being the key word there. He's just a normal guy whose family got caught in the crossfire of a superhero conflict. His resentment toward the Avengers is understandable. Even his approach is quite ingenious when you think about it, even if it is wildly complicated. But on paper, he was still working smarter rather than harder. He knew that there was no way he could ever defeat the Avengers on his own. An entire alien army couldn't do that. The only way to bring them down was to get them to fight each other. That's what he essentially tells them during the final battle. However, this speech doesn't necessarily make him a Bond villain, it just reduces him to a plot device. What Zemo did, manipulating the Avengers and guiding them towards this conflict, only amplified the effects of Bucky's presence. His actions help override these critical issues surrounding superhero accountability. Now, he might not have caused everything leading up to the Sokovia Accords, but he did exploit it. In doing so, he rendered the whole plot that emerged from that secondary. He gave the characters even more reasons to leave these difficult questions unanswered. In the grand scheme of things, he made it even harder to ask those questions. Because of him, the Sokovia Accords feel less like a response to reckless superhero activity and more a villainous plot. And of course Captain America is going to oppose that plot. And anyone who fights him won't have the moral high ground. How can they? The guy on the other side is Captain freaking America. Add Zemo's influence to the mix and suddenly this isn't a civil war. It's just an elaborate manipulation plot. And while it does make for plenty of drama, it effectively cannibalizes its own story. Instead of the larger complexities surrounding superheroes clashing over principles, it devolves into a typical hero versus villain story. It has a lot of wasted potential, and a lot of it was wasted for the wrong reasons. Zemo's impact on Civil War went beyond his villainous machinations. His entire reason for plotting against the Avengers was still misguided. As I said before, his motivations are understandable. His family died because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time in the worst possible way. But even if his motivations are understandable, they're still exceedingly flawed. Of course, the Avengers didn't actually kill his family. They didn't break into their home and shoot them point blank. The only reason they were in the crossfire was because Ultron made Sokovia the epicenter for his genocidal plot in Age of Ultron. And that was Ultron's doing, not the Avengers. They didn't choose the side of that battle, they just responded to it. And yes, Tony did create Ultron, but blaming him for Ultron's actions is like blaming the inventor of ski masks for every convenience store robbery. And honestly, what was the alternative? Stay out of Sokovia and let Ultron kill everyone? Zemo acts as though the Avengers had a choice in the matter. But Zemo isn't the only one heaping unwarranted blame on the Avengers. At one point in the Civil War movie, a woman named Miriam Sharp blames Tony Stark for the death of her son. But like Zemo, it's not the least bit warranted. Again, Tony Stark didn't shoot her son. He died because of Ultron's actions. But she can't blame Ultron because Ultron is gone, so she blames someone else. And again, regardless of Tony's role in creating Ultron, She's still heaping blame on someone who didn't directly kill her son. Now, as painful as it is to lose a loved one to something you can't control, blaming someone who's not responsible doesn't avenge anyone. It's just looking for someone to yell at who can feel your pain. But what good does that do in the grand scheme of things? This is why the whole conflict surrounding superhero accountability matters. This is why the discussions about collateral damage matters. It's what fueled the Civil War conflict in the comics, but the movie uses it as nothing more than a catalyst. In later MCU movies, the Sokovia Accords are still mentioned, but it's never more than a minor complication for certain characters. The overall merits of the Accords or the intentions behind them are never fully addressed. The whole effort to hold superheroes responsible for their actions just completely falls flat. And this is where the movie doesn't just diverge from the comics, it entirely misses the point of that story, and it robs the audience of a much greater impact. Now, I know most people who see a Marvel movie aren't intimately familiar with the complex continuity of the comics. Civil War, being a major crossover comic event, involved a lot more comics than a standard 6-issue arc. But you need only know how that story ended to appreciate just how much the movie missed. In the comics, there was no plot by someone like Zemo. There was no hidden hand manipulating all the heroes. All the clashes and conflicts were a direct result of the same bitter divisions surrounding the Superhero Registration Act. With each clash, characters became more desperate. More desperation led to more painful choices that caused plenty of drama, including Spider-Man revealing his identity to the world. It is one of the most dramatic moments of the story, and one that caused a great deal of upheaval among the fans. But it wasn't the only one. Throughout the story, some characters switch sides, others double down on the side they choose. And it all culminates in this big final confrontation between Iron Man and Captain America. It's dramatic, it's destructive, it's gut-wrenching. Both heroes leave each other bloody, battered, and bruised. And for a while, it looks like Captain America will win out. His steadfast commitment to his ideals, along with his unbreakable will, looks like it's going to win the day. Then, just as Cap is about to subdue Tony, he comes to a heartbreaking realization. They're not fighting for principles anymore. They're just fighting. He realizes, in a painful moment of clarity, that he was wrong. Even if his principles are right, his actions were still wrong. He led the charge in this division. He's responsible for all this damage. In that painful moment, Captain America, the embodiment of American ideals and strength, surrenders. I still remember my reaction to that scene all those years ago. My jaw hung open for a good 5 minutes. Seeing Captain America break down like that, realizing and accepting this painful truth, was incredible. It was a pivotal moment for that particular era of Marvel Comics. That ending carried with it so much meaning. It was a moment where the whole concept of being a superhero came into question. Because what is a hero who is accountable to no one? What is a hero who opposes the very government they claim to embody? The answer for Cap in that moment is not very heroic. And as soon as he accepts that, he takes it upon himself to stop the fighting. He shoulders the responsibility, turning himself in, acknowledging the damage he's done. It's such a dramatic moment and one few readers expected, but it worked within the context of the story. It fit perfectly with the larger themes and concepts they'd explored. When I heard Marvel Studios was making a Civil War movie, I was so excited to see this same story play out. I expected the ending to be different, but not so different that it lost sight of that concept entirely. Overall, I didn't think the ending to Captain America Civil War was bad. I wasn't disappointed with how it played out, but I did find it somewhat bland. It's one of those awkward cases in which not being familiar with the source material actually helps you enjoy the movie. The ending to Civil War in the comics was just so jarring. It completed a complex story full of profound questions by hitting the characters with all these distressing answers. It opened the door to greater upheavals that rocked the comics for years. In the MCU, we just got Iron Man lashing out at Captain America. Admittedly, that scene had some drama to it. That moment when Tony finds out that Bucky killed his parents was great. It gave dramatic weight to the fight that followed. But again, it undercuts the reasons why they were fighting in the first place. It turns this complex conflict into a simple clash between two heroes. Their different styles just fall to the wayside. Their principles as well as their overall characterization just become secondary. It becomes very personal. So personal, in fact, that it misses the bigger picture, and it robs the story of so much potential. Imagine, if you will, an ending that actually mirrored the spirit of the comics. Cap and Tony are fighting. They're hurting each other, wounding each other. Even with all his gear and logistics, Tony can't win. He's about to fall. Then, as Captain America looks over Tony Stark's bludgeoned form and sees the blood on his hands, Cap falls to his knees in a painful realization. He's not just fighting to save his friend anymore. He's not just fighting for what's right anymore. He's just fighting. No cause, no war, no greater purpose. Just misguided violence. Imagine the impact that could have had on the larger MCU. Captain America surrendering himself to the authorities. Maybe he does so with the promise that those who fought by his side were released. Maybe he also finds a way to get Bucky to Wakanda. But those are just secondary details. Captain America started a superhero civil war and took it upon himself to end it, and it costs him his freedom. How powerful would that ending have been? How aghast would audiences have been? It's probably for that very reason that it didn't happen. The ending to this movie felt perfectly in line with an ending to a standard superhero movie. Captain America saved his friend, escaped the authorities, and continued being the iconic hero he's always been. It's the kind of ending I'm sure sits well with Disney executives, but one that feels hollow, given the nature of the plot and the story that inspired it. In the end, the biggest thing working against this movie is that it's a Captain America movie. Some still call it Avengers 2.5, but that's not what the title sequence says. Given how the story played out, this is still a Captain America movie through and through. Civil War or no Civil War, it was always going to be Cap's battle to fight, and, by default, his battle to win. Even without the benefit of hindsight, it's hard to imagine the movie playing out any other way. And that essentially took away from much of the tension. Even though the movie is framed as heroes fighting heroes, one side clearly has the benefit of the doubt. And while the other isn't outright villainized, there's never a sense that their side has the same merit. Later movies only undermine Tony's side even more. You could even argue that it's because of the events of Civil War that the Avengers could not stop Thanos. By being so divided, they weren't in a position to help each other when Thanos arrived in Infinity War. Overall, the movie we got was still a Captain America movie, and you just can't frame Civil War like that without losing a critical element to the story if you're going by the source material. Now, if I've given you the impression that I hate this movie, I apologize. Let me repeat. I still like this movie. It had great acting and great fight scenes. It impacts the course of the MCU more than most other Marvel movies. But I still found it somewhat unsatisfying in the end. I still feel like too much got lost in the translation from comics to film. There's just so much more this movie could have done. What we got was good, if not serviceable. This movie's flaws aren't as glaring as others, but they're still there, and I think they're worth discussing. But what do you think? Do you agree with my criticisms? What's your take on Civil War, both the movie and the comic that inspired it? Please let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, everyone, and thanks for joining me in my world today. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Take care and stay safe.